Good evening. This is the Village of Lake Bluff Historic Preservation Commission, our regular monthly meeting. It is March 10, 2021. We have 8 items on our agenda this evening, starting with the roll call. If you could call the roll, please.
Certainly. Member Bergman.
Here.
Member George.
Here.
Member Liebold is absent. Member Minor.
Here.
Member Nickel.
Here.
Vice Chair Richardson. Here. And Chair Kraus.
Here.
Here.
We have a
quorum. Agenda item number 2 is the consideration of the meeting minutes for, I know we met a lot, but this is silly, January 27, February 3rd, February 10, February 16, February 24. I know that we were asked to submit in advance any clerical issues that we might have or changes. I caught a couple of things that Glenn has taken care of. And do we have anyone who would like to discuss any one of those minutes or any items individually?
I will note that we posted we did post a red line with those changes we received from Chair Kraus earlier today. The village's email server has been down for the better part of the day, so we apologize for not circulating those further in advance of the meeting.
And mine were essentially clerical. So here in
They must have been minor.
Yeah, they were.
Can I make a motion to accept all of the minutes in one vote?
Yes, sir.
And I will second.
Have a motion and a second to accept the January 27, February 3rd, February 10, February 16, and February 24 meeting minutes. Is there any additional discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Certainly. Member Bergman.
Yes.
Member George.
Yes.
Member Liebold is absent. Member Minor.
Yes.
Member Nickel.
Yes.
Vice Chair Richardson.
Yes.
And Chair Kraus.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3, as is our policy, we allow 15 minutes at the beginning of each meeting for individuals either live in the audience, or I see we have 4 people online with us. If there are questions or comments that are within our purview but are not on tonight's agenda. So is there anyone who'd like to so address the committee? Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 4, which is a significant demolition review for 210 West Washington Avenue. We have received a packet. I believe we have the applicant with us tonight. I would just like to say before we start this that thank you, sir, for investing in Lake Bluff, for moving here and wanting to upgrade your residence. I think the plans are great and hopefully they will fit your needs, and hopefully we can have this be as painful a process as possible. Do the commissioners, unless, sir, if you'd like to make a few comments, you don't need to, but if you'd like to make a few comments.
No, I mean, just real briefly, again, you guys have it, so I don't want to rehash it, but I think I'd like to reiterate just how much effort went into improving this home with keeping as much existing structure as possible and increasing the footprint of the home as little as possible to preserve green space and open space around our home. So we really did spend a lot of time and effort to make sure that both of those things were well thought out, and we were able to accomplish that in the most efficient way possible. And thank you all for your time and effort on the committee. I understand it's a lot of work and sometimes thankless, so appreciate all the work you guys do.
Well, thank you. Do commissioners have any questions?
No question, but I would just say I appreciated the work that you did. I think it was great. Happy to have young people your age staying in town and carrying on. So I just appreciated your proposal.
Yeah, I would just like to reaffirm what Sherry just said. I think that Well, first of all, thank you so much for checking out any possible historic significance of the home. We always appreciate your taking that into consideration. I drove by the house, and the new drawings just show that there's going to be a lovely home that fits within the scale of the neighborhood, and I think that it's going to be really nice. And thank you for all your work and what you did, and I hope you and your family are very happy there.
Any other comments?
Well, I can just say that I agree with what everyone else has said. I think the plans are lovely. I think I know that house from probably the 80s when a friend of ours used to live there. And it was, you know, it's a little house, and you know, if you've got a couple of kids, you're going to want some more space. So I think what you're doing is, you know, good for the village, good for you, and good for us. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And for people who appreciate history, the unique history for me in this home is the fact that the home prior to me was owned by a retired Lake Forest police officer. I am a current Lake Forest police officer, and the family worked with me to be able to afford it and pull this off. So it's neat to see lifelong residents, you know, sharing a profession, working together and making this work. And we truly enjoy being here, and I think this will make it so it's very comfortable for us for a very long time.
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
And I'd like to add a comment too, if I may. I too drove through the neighborhood.
Well, you froze.
I'm sorry?
You're
You're
frozen, Paul.
I think he's good for us.
It's good for me.
Yeah.
I don't understand what people are saying to me.
Keep going.
Hear me or not hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Somebody keeps interrupting me, and I don't know what people are trying to say. So what I was trying to say is that I drove through the neighborhood, and I think the modifications to the house are in keeping with the scale of the neighborhood. And what I find so important is that the house isn't going to overwhelm the other houses in the neighborhood, and that this addition, when completed, is going to fit in with the rest of the houses, whether they are still part of the one-story original ranches or the now growing two-story additions on the rest of the houses. This house fits into the rest of the neighborhood without overwhelming it. And if you live in a neighborhood where you have 1,000 and 1,500 square foot houses next to 4,000 square foot houses, you know what a great imbalance this can be. And so I want to thank you for maintaining a great Lake Bluff tradition of remodeling your house and expanding it as you need it, but also for keeping it well within the scale and the framework of the neighborhood. So thank you for that.
Any other comments? If not, I would entertain a motion that the HPC terminate review of this significant demolition and authorize only the partial demolition of this structure as shown in the letter of intent. Would someone like to make that motion?
I
So
still,
moved. Oh,
go ahead, Sherry.
Janie?
Sherry?
We'll take first and second.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Certainly, from here on out, as a note, we'll randomize the order. Member Minor.
Here, or yes.
Member Nickel.
Yes.
Member Bergman.
Yes.
Member Church.
Yes.
Member Leibold is absent. Vice Chair Richardson.
Yes.
And Chair Kraus.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The motion is approved, and thank you for your presentation, and thank you for investing in the village. We look forward to dropping by and seeing how the work is going.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Let's move to agenda item number 5. But so this is the larger agenda item tonight. It's to review the proposed revisions to the village historic preservation policies. Let me tee up what I'm suggesting we use as a process for this. We have really four things to do with respect to this agenda item. The first is to discuss and potentially recommend approval to send to the village board the actual changes to the village's historic preservation ordinance that we've been discussing. We offer almost a year, I believe, in this format. So what I'm proposing there, I will review for us and for the audience, both virtual and those on tape, the memo of February 24th, which is the one that highlights the changes to the ordinance, just to have those all on record. We'll then have an opportunity for the commission members to ask questions or give their thoughts on the proposed changes. I'll open it up to the audience if there's anyone who would like to if they have a comment or opinions around those ordinance changes. And then I would entertain a motion to move this forward back to the village board. So that's the first thing we'll do. The second thing, which I want to do separately, are the incentives for historic structures. Those are in Glenn's memo dated March 5th, agenda number 5, page 2. Just identify the incentives that we're recommending that the village board consider. In effect, we're asking the village board to set up a study group to review the potential incentives that would enhance historic preservation in the village. So we'll do that separate. We'll talk about what those incentives are. We'll have the commission members ample opportunity to discuss. We'll open it up for questions from the audience, and then hopefully have a motion to approve those and move them on to the village board as well. The third is the highest priority structures for preservation. Thank you, all of you commission members who have submitted ideas. Unfortunately, we didn't have an opportunity to consolidate those ideas. I'll give you a quick summary. I saw them first an hour and a half ago, maybe an hour ago. So I'll briefly summarize them, but unfortunately, we're going to need a meeting next week to finalize the list, and then hopefully recommend that that list be attached to the recommendations that go to the village board. And then the fourth thing is to quickly review the transmittal document, which is actually a resolution that would accompany all of these documents that would go to the village board. So that's the process I'm proposing that we follow. Is that okay with everyone?
Excuse me.
Okay. So agenda item 5A are changes that we've been recommended to the village's historic preservation ordinance. These are changes that we have discussed at all of those special meetings for which we just approved minutes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 special, regular or special meetings, as well as the comments that we received from villagers and comments that the village board had received. So we have a series of recommendations that I'm just going to summarize, and they're in 4 buckets. The first is the designation of a landmark, what the process is and how that happens. The second are, okay, so now I'm a landmark, what does that mean? What are the implications of landmark status? The third, what happens to non-landmarks? So I'm not a landmark, but I'm a significant, potentially significant structure in the village. What happens to me in terms of historic preservation? And then fourth, where we've landed on voluntary historic districts. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly just to have them on the record for this meeting. So designation of a landmark, who can designate a landmark, who can apply? So the preference is that the property owner applies for their property to become landmark. but the ordinance retains the opportunity for the Historic Preservation Commission or the village board to put a landmark application, well, there we are, landmark application in front of the commission. So that's who can nominate. It's critical to recognize that landmarks apply only to designated portions of exterior. We're not interested in the interior. We're not interested in additions that are not visible from the street. Even in landmarks, we're looking at preservation of streetscape, and we're not at all concerned about what happens to the inside of the structure. Item 1C, this was requested in our feedback sessions. This is a very tangible request from our audience to the degree that is possible, eliminate the uncertainty in what structures are or might be landmarked. So what structures are landmarked or on the National Register, that's easy. We need to do a better job of publishing those. We have a tool for that, website tool that hopefully we can launch very quickly. And then for the ones that this body considers the structures that we want to take more time on to determine potential landmarking, we are working on a list, as I think everyone knows, and we will publish that list in conjunction with this activity. Wanted to do that tonight, but it's just going to take one more meeting to make that happen. Item 1D, National Register properties, and there's a goodly number in the village, both districts and individual structures. There's a presumption that National Register properties qualify for village landmark status. Item 1E, and this is what some of us have been calling the gotcha clause, eliminating the gotcha clause. One thing that none of us like, no one likes, is, but sometimes we've had to do it, in the face of a demolition request, sometimes the village has landmarked property. Think of the Keck and Keck home on the Crabtree Farm area. That was one that was landmarked in the face of demolition. We would prefer not to do that. So we have agreed that give us 3 years. We will have gone through the landmarking discussions and with the property owners, and hopefully have a number of landmarks that are added to the rolls. So in the 4th year after approval of the ordinance, the village agrees to no longer suggest the property be landmarked in the face of a demolition request. 1F, landmark status is maintained if property ownership changes. So it isn't just one property owner, it is moving from property owner to property owner. And then 1G is just making it very clear that landmark status ends if a structure is demolished or significantly altered. So that's how landmark or property becomes designated as a landmark. I'm just going to go through these before we go for questions. I'll go through all of these. So number 2, okay, what happens if I am the owner of a landmark property? What happens? What does that mean? So let me go to 2B first. So 2B is the positive side, and that owners of landmark properties are eligible for historic preservation financial incentives. Right now, there are potential state property tax deferrals and state incentives. There are local fee waivers. And 2C are the lists of things that we'll talk about in a minute, where we're recommending to the village board that there be additional financial incentives. And on the top of the next page, the flexibility around zoning provisions in the face of landmark status. So that's what the positive features are. There's potential for tax savings and other fee waivers, and we're looking for zoning relief and other fees and license reductions. So 2A is what is the other side of landmark status. So if so this is a landmark property. There are, I forget the number, I always do, 20 or so landmarks within the village. Those and others that may join them are subject to a potential delay in the issuance of permits for a demolition or significant alteration. So if the owner of a landmark property wishes to demolish that house or wishes to significantly modify that structure, that's defined as modifications that impact 50% or more of the exterior walls, then there are potential delays, is a review by this body, and those potential delays for alterations may be delayed by 95 days, and for demolitions may be delayed by up to 365 days. Why are we recommending this? Those are increased from the current provisions in the ordinance. We have the village has this right. In the current ordinance, we're recommending those be increased. And the reason we feel this is important is to give property owners, neighbors, an opportunity for discussion, an opportunity to understand what's happening to what some may consider to be a visual landmark, an anchor, a familiar representation of historic Lake Bluff, and to understand what the proposal is for that property, and also to work with the property owner to see if there are alternatives to complete demolition, which may include an alteration, perhaps with an addition, perhaps with some zoning relief that would retain the historic character of the home, but would keep that home historical in nature, but allow the owner to upgrade it for their needs in the 21st century. That's the real reason for the delay, is to have that dialogue and the opportunity, perhaps even to look for alternative ownership, or to look for some creative ways of potentially saving that landmark structure. The last piece of implications of landmark status is that in order to make this work, the property owner needs to participate throughout the process so we can have a dialogue. So that's the reason for requesting additional delays, is to have an opportunity to work with the property owner to not demolish the structure, to do something less intrusive to that landmark. Remember, those are just for those landmark structures. Number 3, on the next page. So we've talked about how a home becomes landmark. We've talked about what it means to be landmark. This deals with every other structure within the village, so non-landmark structures. Remember, there are 20 landmarks now. Hopefully there'll be a few more in the future. So what happens when I want to demolish or significantly alter a non-landmark? So first of all, there's a trigger. So demolitions to what homes get reviewed, or significant alterations to what homes get reviewed? And that trigger is 50 years. If a home is 50 years old or older, that automatically triggers a review by the HPC in the face of a demolition permit or a significant demolition or a significant alteration permit. And again, significant demolition is that 50% of the exterior of a particular structure. The discussion today on 210 West Washington, that was triggered because that structure is 50 years old. The process went very smoothly. It's a great addition. It retains character, it retains the streetscape, it's in scale, it fits all the boxes. But the reason the property owner was here is because it hit that 50-year threshold. Why 50 years? 50 years is the standard that has been developed by the folks that run the National Register of Historic Places. It's a standard that most of the cities, towns, and villages that do historic preservation use as a trigger point. It's also one that the professional historic preservation consultants that the villages used and others use that as their basis for which structures are we going to look at for potential potential historic significance. So that's the 50-year threshold. So and this is item 3B, so if a demolition or significant alteration is triggered, the HPC will review the historic, cultural, and architectural impact of the proposed changes. And there may be, in some cases, and we haven't had many of these, but there may be a delay of up to 180 days to review the process and again gain public input. Item 3C is recognizing that some discussions, candidly, like this evening's discussion, which are great, in my view, was a great addition to a great house in the context of the neighborhood. We put an expedited review process in place. So if a structure like 210 West Washington, there is a significant alteration building permit request, that structure was not rated as significant in the historic surveys that the village had contracted, and is not identified as a potential future landmark by this commission. In that case, we're proposing an expedited review process where the chair of the HPC can, in writing and with reason, determine that the significant alteration or demolition is not contradictory to the objectives of the HPC. If the chair does not so determine, then the regular process would apply in front of the HPC and potentially demolition delays. So that's the idea. The vast majority of properties in the village would fall under this, but only properties that are at least 50 years old, that there's a request to tear them completely down or to have a significant addition and alteration, that's 50% number. Those are the only ones that would come to this body. The last major topic that we're discussing are historic districts, and these have changed significantly from what we have looked at in the past. In essence, we are looking at historic districts. The applicant for historic districts must be a neighbor, must be an owner of a property within the proposed district, and that application must include support of the lesser of 10 other owners or 50% of the owners within the proposed district. So this is an owner-generated request for historic district status. If those property owners have reached that threshold and there is an application for districts, then the HPC will work with the applicants and with the property owners during the process. Part of it will be defining what the district is, and part of it, importantly, is identifying every structure in that proposed district as either contributing to the historic nature of the district or non-contributing to the integrity of the district. We'll talk about what that means at the end. The HPC, when their work is done, will vote on the district application. If the application is approved, the request for the village board to authorize a vote of the property owners will occur. The vote of the property owners, if at least 50% of owners vote and a majority of those voting affirm the district, then the application is forwarded to the village board for approval. The implications of a historic district. So within the district, requests for demolition or significant alterations will be reviewed by the HPC regardless of age of the structure. But the difference is whether it's a contributing structure or a non-contributing structure. If it's a structure contributing to the integrity of the district, then the rules governing a landmark would apply. So you would go up to 2A to follow those rules. If it's a non-contributing structure, then you would look at 3B for what would happen for a potential alteration to a non-contributing structure. And that, in a very large nutshell, are the recommendations that are included in the draft ordinance. And with that, are there any questions or comments from the commissioners? We do have, yeah, go ahead.
Under the first section, designations of a landmark.
Yep.
The 1C about HPC and making recommendations about potential landmarks. So it says that we'll be doing that for up to 3 years. What about in year 4, if there is a home that really seems to be a wonderful addition to the list of landmarked homes? Will we still be able to initiate a landmark or work with the homeowners about landmarking their home, or how will that play out 4 years from now?
Sure. So let me go to the kind of the last part of your question.
Okay.
Property owners within the village are always encouraged to look at their home for landmarking. So
Right.
Nothing in here precludes a property owner from requesting landmark status, from researching their home, from getting excited about the history of their house. And that is now, that's 3 years from now, that's 25 years from now. So a property owner can always voluntarily go through this process, and we encourage them and will be encouraging them very strongly in the future to do that.
Okay.
In the process from now until 3 years from now, roughly, we will, and again, this is based on feedback from our viewing audience, we will have a short list of structures that we are going to work with the property owners on understanding their desire or not desire to have that particular property landmark. We're hoping that, and by the way, so we started with, so the village has worked with Susan Benjamin's firm, his professional historic consultants, historic preservation consultants. There are 4 separate reports that they have produced that have touched every structure within the village, and they've identified those structures as significant to the history of Lake Bluff, contributing to the history of Lake Bluff, or non-contributing to the history of Lake Bluff. And its history in terms of architectural, social, the feeling of, et cetera. So we have a list of significant structures within the village. That's the list that we have been looking at. That was distributed in the information for this meeting. The list that was distributed with the information for this meeting are all of the structures identified as significant, but excluding ones that have already been landmarked, ones that have been, that are a historic district or are a National Register listed home, and unfortunately 11 structures that have already been demolished that were on that historic list. So between now, so our next step is to take that 90-some structures and narrow that 90-some structures that we think are significant, our professional consultants think are significant, and all of whom will, at a very minimum, receive information from the village on the historic nature of their home. The things we want to do is increase awareness of the historic nature of structures in the village. Most property owners know the history. If there are a few that have just moved in, we want to make sure they understand the context of their home, their home context of the broader village. So all of those significant structures will receive an outreach from the village. The shorter list that we're going to now define next week and will be published as part of our communication to the village board. That was the request of our audience. Those we will make a concerted effort to talk with property owners about their interest in being landmarked. I don't know the result of those conversations. I'm hopeful that many of them will want to be landmarked. I know there'll be some who will not. The decision that this body and ultimately the village board will need to make is if one of those small group of properties that's on the most significant list does not want to be landmarked, at some point, this body will need to recommend to the village board if that property be landmarked without consent, or if it not be landmarked, and keep working with the property owner and hopefully encourage voluntary landmarking, which is the desire. We don't want to do that. We want property owners to do this on their own with the help of the commission. But for the first 3 years, we're going to be going through that process. Quite candidly, if at the end of 3 years, we haven't made a decision on every one of those properties, then we haven't done our job. So from a personal perspective, I will not pursue any structure for involuntary landmarking after that 3-year period is over. To be completely open and candid and transparent, there is a provision that very specific, I was going to say suggests, but it very specifically says the village, and this is section 6 of the resolution, says the village board should direct that the resource surveys and the list of highest priority properties provided in section 5 be reviewed periodically so that each continues to represent a current inventory of the village's historic and architectural resources. So if there is more information or new information about a structure after the 3-year time period, in that situation, the village board could request that the process be opened. That's the village board, not the HPC. So is that too convoluted? Were those too many words to answer a question?
No.
Okay, but can I ask clarification? Because what I thought I just heard was after 3 years, it will only be the homeowner that would initiate it. But I think as I read it, it's only initiated when a demolition permit is in. Together or not?
No, there are. So the intent, and Ben or Glenn, you can help here. So the 3-year threshold has 2 things to it. The first is what I call the gotcha clause. Where is the gotcha clause? That that we're not going to go through landmarking after 3 years in the face of a demolition request. Okay, so that's one thing. The second is under 1C, to reduce confusion in future designation of landmarks, the HPC will publish a list of properties that it will consider for landmark status and will make a recommendation to the village board regarding each such property within 3 years of ordinance adoption. So yeah, that very specifically says that our work will be done at the end of 3 years.
Okay, so use case, home is, because history is in the making, ongoing, right?
Sure.
So this is a point in time in
Sure.
10 years from now, when we look back, we might have a different definition of what that is, because there will be new houses involved. But it will be up to the homeowner to initiate that landmarking status. Is that
unless the village board takes different action?
Okay.
And that might be, for example, 10 years might be a good time to hire another professional consultant to come in and review the housing stock of the village and to see if there are any changes in the housing stock, if there's a certain type of, if mid-century modern has become so popular and historic and recognized, and we didn't get some the first time. So, but it would be the village board that would need to initiate that, and that might open up a new round of conversations. But after 3 years, the intent here, if we need to do our job within 3 years. And after that, we will have identified and will have talked with the property owners and have made a decision on whether to move forward with landmark status for the structures that we need to do it for.
Thank
That
you.
was probably, again, too many words for what was an easy answer, I think.
You know, piggybacking on Margaret's question, do you anticipate any houses that fall short of the 50-year deadline or the 50-year cutoff point for more oversight by our commission to enter that in, say, the next 10 years, as Margaret said, that we might want to landmark? I mean, I'm trying to think of any structures or homes in town that I would put in that category, and I'm not sure I'm thinking of any, but
Yeah, one of the nice things of having the Benjamin surveys is that they were not focused, their definition of significance isn't based on the 50-year threshold.
Okay.
So we have some structures, Larry Booth's wonderful home is on the significant list, even though that's nowhere near 50 years old, for example. So the Benjamin team has done their job in identifying historic structures without respect to age. So if there are some that they consider significant that are younger than 50, they would be on this list. Any other questions? Yeah.
Okay. I just want to go back to the list of the 20 significant structures. I guess I think it's really important that I know we want to be transparent, but when we determine what those homes are, and when we share them, that people who may be on the list understand that doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily forcibly try to landmark all those homes.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other side applies as well for property owners who are not on that list and who want to be. Please, we would love to have that discussion around landmarking. So this is the best effort of a group of people who are knowledgeable in historic preservation in the village of Lake Bluff to come up with, the anchors in the village, the ones that really impact the streetscape, the ambiance, and have good, candid discussions with property owners, within that 3-year time frame. 3 years seems like a long time, but it takes time to go through all of these.
But the ordinance does authorize this group to do that, right? It doesn't want to do it, and it may likely not do it, but the ordinance that we're drafting authorizes this group.
The existing ordinance allows for involuntary landmarking, and we're not changing that. We're putting sunset provisions on it regarding the 3 years, a 3-year sunset in 2 particular instances.
Okay.
Let me open it up. We have some folks in the audience. If there's anyone in the audience that has questions or would like to comment. And I don't see any, the more we do this, the better I am at manipulating. Don't see any questions in queue. All I need is a green screen behind me and I'll be all set. Any additional discussions? Okay, so hearing none, I would entertain a motion to forward the modifications to the historic preservation. Go ahead.
Are we not going through the next? I thought we were just still on the 1A. Are we not going to discuss these? I'm going to have a vote for 1A, or 5A, 5B, and 5C. Is that what you mean?
Well, we just had questions around the designation of landmark. I thought we were going to go through, ask, or talk about each of the.
Oh, go ahead, sure. Sorry.
So we're on the implications of landmark status.
Sure.
The
extension of time from 6 months to up to a year. You talked about all the things that you hope for to accomplish for that extension. It feels like if we're going to make that extension, we should specify what the process should be to justify the delay or the potential delay or the extra time. So, because it's procedural, right? I mean, we could certainly in 6 months get people to talk to their neighbors. We could, so to justify an additional 6 months, it feels to me like we should provide a schedule or a checklist or something that we expect to do that we weren't able to do in the 6 months. Is that a time
yeah.
and the cost, both
Yeah.
to the village and the property owner?
Yeah. Quite candidly, I don't think we will do anything different. I don't think we do anything in addition. I think we would do more of the conversations and more of the looking for alternatives than we've done in the past. Sometimes I'm thinking now of a home on Prospect that many of us dealt with relatively recently, and it took 6+ months and the property owner, as happens often, so the property owner had a vision in the beginning. We had conversations with that vision because we were, from a historic preservation perspective, had some concerns. That property owner went back with the architect and came up with a whole different vision that actually went to the PCCBA, that then came back to the HPC. Now we're 4 months into this process. And then we finally got down to conversations around what an acceptable alternative might be. So unfortunately, sometimes it just takes longer to make this happen. Sometimes, I hear you, sometimes this looks, if there's an intransigent conversation, if things aren't moving, it will look like we're just wasting time. But we're hopeful that we can have ongoing discussions with the property owner, talking about incentives, talking about, I think the incentives around zoning flexibility actually may help incent conversations around alternatives to demolition. If you need, if you need more bedrooms or more bathrooms, there may be ways to do that by working just slightly outside of the zoning code, and some of that's going to take more time.
In absence of providing some transparency to what that process looks like, though, this could be interpreted as arbitrary. So that's the reason for the suggestion.
Okay. Would you be comfortable with that being in the resolution of that we're forwarding, or do you think it needs to be in the ordinance, or can it be in the recommended administration of this? Ben or Glenn, do you have any comments on where this should be?
Well, one option would be to put into the ordinance that when the delay period is extended, that this body will provide a summary of what they want to accomplish or what their goals are for during the extension. That might be one way to do it. So, for example, and I'm looking at one of the extensions in 914-9.
You have a page number for us?
I'm on page 27.
Okay, thank you.
So just to make clear where we are in our code is, this is advisory review of changes to protected features. And under the procedure section, under subsection F, there's the maximum review duration, which starts off with no sooner than 120 days following the submittal of a complete application, protected feature building that is not protected, but over 50 years old. And it goes on to talk about later on this in subsection 3, that we may extend for a period of initial 245 days. So, for example, in this section, you could put, you know, in issuing such an extension, the HPC shall set forth a summary of what steps it would like to follow, or what, you know, or what its goals are during that delay period. Something simple. I don't know if that addresses, Member Minor, your concerns, but that might be a place to put it.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that actually. That there would be almost a list of items, reasons for requesting, and I like it right there too, Ben. So that the HPC has gone through their review, we're now asking the village board to extend that review, which the vast majority of the delay is at the village board level. It seems right, and we typically do in our transmittal letter, but it seems right in the ordinance to put in a requirement for the HPC to rationalize why 145 days potential additional delay is necessary, and what we're hoping to have conversations with the property owner about. I think that's a perfect place. I think that's a good solution.
Chairman Crowe. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that I think that the village board would probably be much more amenable to giving that extension if we provided them with that reasons. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well,
Everyone agree with that?
mind
Margaret, that's a great idea.
Bear in mind that during the course of the discussion, those reasons come up to the forefront to begin with. I mean, when we talked about the Keck and Keck house up at Crabtree Farm, we had some very specific points that we wanted to make. And some of them were, to be a little straightforward about this, some of them were just downright ornery, okay? We did not want them to tear down the house because we thought it was a splendid house of national significance, been advertised and written up in all of the national magazines, Architectural Digest and whatnot. We thought it was a national prominence house, and that we felt that the landowner could do more in trying to market the house. And quite honestly, waiting a year's time, part of that waiting is to see if a purchaser will show up. So sure. I don't know that you can define all of this. I mean, people want to talk about transparency and lists and things like that. A lot of times you have to just simply put a time limit on this and let the magic occur. And
yeah, I think, Paul, the conversations, and that's a good example, the conversations, they happen. I think this just requires the HPC to use, to document those. And
what worries me is if we get down to having to document too much of this, we begin forestalling and we begin closing out other options and stuff. And so I don't want to get down to the point where we're going to write down, you know, paragraph after paragraph of information and trying to give the village some idea of what we're doing. A lot of times there's an awful lot of just sort of thinking that has to go on and whatnot. So
yeah, I envision this as being
a very emotional process that goes on, and there's a lot of dynamics that go into this. Yeah. People who have an idea sometimes have to wait 2 or 3 months before the next idea occurs to them. Where are they going to put the bedrooms, or how are they going to do this or that, or how is the financing going to change? So there's a lot of, you know, let's not try and nail this down so hard that we end up with unintended consequences.
Yeah, I don't expect that we will, Paul.
Okay.
I think that this is a document that is both specific and general. You know, and one of the things in a demolition would be, you know, the request of the property owner for additional marketing, which is nicely broad. So I think this is something that we do some of, but this just says we do it all the time. And I actually like it as a document that goes to the village board from the HPC as to why we're asking them to extend. Other comments?
Just on that one, this is just a personal preference that we would encourage the property owners to participate in the process. As Paul just said, it is emotional, and there are some people that have the personality or the characteristic to withstand that, and others would be better served by using attorneys or architects to represent their best interest. But
Yep, I gotcha. And the ordinance actually allows the property owner to designate an individual with power of attorney to discuss this issue in front of the HPC.
thank you.
That's also important if we have an owner that isn't a person. So we need some designated representative. We prefer the owner, but some designated representative to come before us.
Yeah.
And the other part about the power of attorney is it's somebody who has authority to talk for the owner versus, you don't want somebody to send, this is just a random guy on the contractor team who has no authority to discuss or do anything meaningful. You somebody who has the ability to make a representation and talk on behalf of the owner. And that was very intentional in the way this was designed, allowing somebody to come, but not just anybody.
Yep, I like that a lot.
Okay.
And then I think with the historic districts, just when we're communicating, I believe we should be very clear about so if I understand this correctly, of the people that vote, 50% or more need to vote in the affirmative, right? So say there's 10 homes, five people vote. That means 3 of the 5 need to be positive, right? So then there are potentially 10 homes in that district that are considered historic. And
yeah, so excuse me, just to be technical, it's 50%, 50+%. So
yep.
So if the 50% and only if there are 10 homes and only 5 vote, that wouldn't meet the threshold because it's not over 50%.
Okay.
So if there are 11 homes and we get 6, then
okay.
it is a valid vote, and then you would need 4 to approve.
Okay.
Okay.
That would leave 6 property owners that are need to now abide by the designation, right?
If sure, and yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't have voted, because they could have voted it down in that circumstance, perhaps. Well, in that situation,
Apathy, empathy is not the right word. Apathy is the right word. I don't know. So I just think they need to understand that their house, whether it's landmarked or significant, would fall under those landmark.
Yeah, and the way this is set up is that we still use, real mail, certified mail, return receipt requested, I think, is the way it still is written in the ordinance. The only way this works is if the people that want to do the district have really canvassed their neighbors. And hopefully everybody's for it. And, there's nothing to say that if you have a property owner who doesn't want to be in the district, that you just do this with the district line, you just exclude them.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all, ways to deal with having the district being drawn.
Okay.
Bear in mind that doing a district does not happen in a vacuum. This isn't some silent secret process that goes on.
No, I remember I heard.
You announce you're going to do a district, and everybody in the neighborhood is talking about it. Every single person is standing out on the parkway, standing out on the sidewalk, talking about it. This is something you're going to be in. You're going to be in other people's living rooms and kitchens, drinking coffee and talking about it. This does not happen in a vacuum. Okay, I have done a couple of these districts.
I know, I heard you.
Not happen in a vacuum. Okay, if you don't know about it and you don't know when the vote is, it's because you are so disconnected from where you live that it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, I hate to be
I don't know that I agree with that statement, but anyway. Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you for your time.
No, if you have any other questions, let's do them. Any other questions from commissioners or the audience? Okay, so, hearing none, I would entertain a motion, and Ben, or Glenn, you can give us the right verbiage. But the
Mr.
motion
Chairman?
is to, yes.
I hate to interrupt you, but you did actually miss an open question in the audience. Specifically,
I'm
I'll
sorry.
read this out loud if that's okay. This is Miss
Oh, I
Beth
did. I
Koff.
apologize.
Okay. Oh, this is Miss Beth Coughlin, who we're happy to let. You're welcome to speak if you like, but she asks, does anyone on the commission own a significant home or plan to apply for status, which I presume means landmark status?
I do not. Fortunately, am in a significant or a contributing home. I would gladly support a district close to me, and I certainly will consider voluntary landmarking for my property after this all gets finished.
I also do not have a significant home or a landmarked home.
Nor do I.
I do not.
No, mine is not either.
Mine is not a significant home, but we've had some interesting comments from our board members because a number of you live in homes that would qualify for landmark status. It may not be on the Susan Benjamin list, but some of those homes easily qualify for landmark status. So if you were to bring the houses forward with just a little bit of history work, we'd have some significant questions to talk about.
Any other comments from that questioner or other questions? All right, I would entertain a motion to forward the recommendations regarding the revisions to the village's historic preservation regulations to the village board.
I so move.
To clarify, Chair, just to clarify,
Yeah.
and it would actually be the one to clarify with is the member who made the motion. We talked about on page 27, adding language about the delay, that if the board imposes the 240 up to an additional 245-day delay, that they shall set forth the goals during that delay period. Do you want that? Is that meant to be included in the motion with that change?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Do we need the exact wording of that change? I suppose we do.
I think it would be equivalent to what I just said, and we will tighten that up before it goes to the village board, but
Could we vote
in your motion.
Could we vote on this at the next meeting next week?
I suppose we could, if we want to do one more time. I would like to get a vote from the commission, because if that's the only change that we're looking for, I would like to get a vote tonight, pending final approval once we see the final draft with that addition. I'm fine with waiting one more to do the final one. If Janie, if you're comfortable with that as your motion?
I am.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to recommend to the village board the changes to the historic preservation ordinance with the change on page 27, as we have discussed, added. This is a preliminary motion for approval. Final motion will be when we see the final document next week at our soon-to-be scheduled meeting. Any additional discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Certainly. Once again, the order is random. Member Church,
Yes.
Member Minor,
Yes.
Member Nickel,
Yes.
Member Bergman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Richardson,
Yes.
and Chair Kraus.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, great. Thank you. Agenda item number 5B is looking at the financial incentives. I think it's appropriate for us to have a separate vote of those financial incentives. They will be communicated in the form of a recommendation that the village board study, and I would suggest that they have a study group to look at the financial incentives. This is actually identified in the resolution that's in our package. It's in section 3. The commission recommends that the village board review and substantially increase the incentives and regulatory consideration available for protected features in the village. Such programs include an increased discount, cap, or waiver of building fees, a local property tax freeze rebate or similar to the village's senior citizen rebate, discount or waiver of the village's application fees, and modifications to the village's zoning relief procedures that ensure a more favorable and or expedited consideration. I think those are significant enough, and they are certainly monetary in their nature, so that puts it outside of our scope. And anything that involves zoning puts it into the lap of the PCCBA as well as the village board. So for those reasons, I think it's important that we solidify our recommendation in the form of a motion. Any discussion?
No, I think it's great.
Motion to make that recommendation for the village board to have a study group to discuss those financial considerations.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. I'll second.
A motion and a second. Lois, you had a question?
I was going to make the motion, but
Okay. Motion.
I second.
Any additional discussion?
Well, just that this is a byproduct of the listening sessions, correct?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that should be called out.
Okay. Paul, are you okay to put that in your motion that as a result of our consideration and feedback from the listening groups?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay. Good. Lois, seconder? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I second.
Okay. Any additional questions? If not, roll call vote, please.
Certainly. Member Bergman,
Yes.
Member Minor,
Yes.
Member Nickel,
Yes.
Member Church,
Yes.
Vice Chair Richardson,
Yes.
Chair Kraus.
Yes.
The motion
Thank you.
carries.
Item number 5C is our list. So just to give you a, let's see. So how many properties are on this list, Glenn? Do you remember?
I believe it's 92,
90
Mr. Chairman.
95.
95. Okay, 95. And of 95, more than half of them. So what we all were struggling with is which of these rise to the level of the anchors in the village, the ones we really want to have serious discussions with the property owners around potential landmarking. More than half of them, none of us suggested, not that they're not wonderful homes, but none of us suggested that they rise to that level. So more than half of them effectively are off of our discussion. And of the others, there's probably 30 that there's fairly, that most people, either all or, well, all, there's, I guess, 6, 7, that everyone who voted said these have to be on, so those will also be not hard discussions. And then there's probably another 20 or so, 25, that we need to talk about because they were recommended by, 1, 2, 3 people. And if we're trying to get to 20, we need to have a good conversation around that. And since we didn't have a chance to distribute it to us, and we certainly didn't have a chance for the residents of the village and these property owners to know who's on this list we're looking at, I think we need to defer consideration of that tonight and have this special meeting to finalize that list next week. So that's my update there. I think you'll be fascinated when you look at the list and see which ones we actually have all agreed on. So if that's okay, the last thing in terms of the votes, we won't take that. So we'll take a vote on the final vote on the ordinance next week, the vote on the significant structures, and then the vote on the transmittal resolution. So if you look at the transmittal resolution, the reason we're not voting on it tonight is that Section 5 includes the identity of those homes that we will identify next week. But this is the transmittal document. It has, the appropriate whereases, and it has the specific documents there. Section 4 is sort of the background. Every property identified as significant in a resource survey or listed on the National Register of Historic Places is likely to be meritorious of a historic designation. The owners of these properties are strongly encouraged to consider applying for a historic designation. The village should correspond with these owners annually to provide information and encouragement concerning designation of these properties. Then Section 5, here are the properties. And then Section 6 says that periodically the village board may decide to have a new resource survey and to open this issue up in the future. So that's why we can't approve that tonight, because it identifies the structures on the list.
Can I ask a question? For the meeting next week, will the property owners that are on that list be invited?
Well, what do you? We certainly could. At this point, it would be all of the property owners that were on the list that you have looked at, since we haven't narrowed that down at all.
This is a working meeting. Why would you invite them?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, aside from having a public meeting where everybody's naturally invited, but I don't know.
Sure.
You haven't made the decision yet.
Right. The more the merrier, in my view. I think from a practical perspective, what is the rest of the group think? I mean, we have the addresses. I was going to say, the only way we could get a hold of them would be by mail.
Yeah, I don't think you have the time, and aside from the fact that everybody in the village is welcome to come to the meeting, we haven't narrowed the list down to the 20 that we're thinking about, and I think there's going to be more than one meeting's worth of discussion.
No, Paul, there can't be, because we want to forward the ordinance to the village board.
You're about moving an awful lot of houses in one meeting, then.
There are not that many, Paul. When you see the list, you'll see there's most often there's consensus. And I really do, if we can't do it, we can't do it, but I really think we can do it in one meeting. And that would be my preference. Not that I don't like meeting with you guys once a week, but my preference.
Steve, how are the numbers? I mean, I know you just got the results of everybody's choices this afternoon, but do you think there's going to be 20? Are there going to be 25?
So without naming names, and we won't have names of who designated what, that doesn't make sense to me. We will have individual, yeses or nos, but without names attached. So, 2 people had 21, one had 28, one had 24, one had 9. So the maximum is 28. Now, some of those don't overlap. So we probably got 31 in total that someone has nominated that we need to run through. And of those 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16. 15 of them have been by at least 3 of the 5 people who filled out the form. So half of them, I think, are pretty straightforward. So we're probably talking about, 15 that we need to talk about individually.
I think, personally, inviting homeowners would be a little bit premature at this point. If the people who own these homes, we certainly let plenty of people know that we were talking about this issue with all the meetings we held. And I don't know very many people who were homeowners of any of these homes who showed up. Mostly it was realtors. So I think being on the tight timeline we would just complicate issues by doing anything more than we usually do, which is just having our meetings be open to the public. Certainly once we get down to our list, notifying those people is paramount. I think we really need to do that. But the fact of the matter is that whether we have their consent or not, we can, for existing ordinance, apply for landmarking and send it on to the village.
So, Glenn, notice of next week's meeting will go out Friday, right?
That's correct, sir.
There will also be in the village newsletter since you write the village newsletter, I think, so there'll be a highlight that this will be discussed, and the list will be not attached, but it'll be part of the meeting agenda.
I suppose I might have to think of a new pun for my pun-filled newsletter by then, but yes, that is correct.
Okay. And do we have social media opportunities to inform those potential property owners that this meeting is going to be happening next week? I assume we do that normally?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a different one. Certainly we work with, and we sometimes post to some Facebook groups in town. I mean, generally for our own groups, we, part of our social media strategy is we don't usually have, routine meetings, controversial issues, things like that, featured on our own pages and outlets.
Would it be inappropriate to have Adrian through the History Museum put out a little blast?
Probably inappropriate. I mean, sort of a different
group.
Wearing a different hat. So just review who this, so the meeting, so on Friday, there'll be notice of meeting that will go to us. There will be the village newsletter. I don't know how many emails the village has on that email distribution list.
There's roughly 1,400 in the village's community-wide newsletter, and then we have another separate list. It's right here in my memo. I think it's in the neighborhood of 115, 120 that we've been using specifically for historic preservation matters.
Yeah. Okay. So it will go out to the 1,400 as a matter of course. It will go out to the people who are a landmark or who have commented at all on historic preservation in the past, right? And I think that's it, right? So all the people on that second list are the folks that have attended meetings, that have created their networks, that have networks that they've tapped into. So we're getting, I think, a goodly amount of people there.
Do we know when the meeting is?
I think
It's a great question.
That's a good thing. Let's go to Wendy.
Great question.
I think Glenn and I were talking briefly, and Glenn, did you think that Monday was an open? Tuesday is the
Library.
the library and also the school board meets in the boardroom.
The school
Wednesday,
board.
the PCCBA meets in the boardroom.
Yeah, so the school board was actually this week. My dates were a little off when we spoke earlier. So Monday we could certainly do. Wednesday the PCCBA meets at 7, so you could meet before that time if you wanted to. You just have a hard stop at 7. Tuesday would work at any time, as would Thursday.
I prefer to do it earlier in the week. How does
Also, yeah, Thursday is the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum.
oh, that's right. That's right. So how does Tuesday work?
Tuesday's not good for me, library board.
Yeah, doesn't
How about
work.
Monday?
Monday's fine with me.
Monday's fine.
Is 7 o'clock, or do we want to meet earlier?
I don't mind earlier.
Oh, would 6 work?
6?
It works for me.
6 o'clock, Monday the 15th?
If I could, if it's all right, so I'll be representing the village on other business that day, and I'm not sure if I would quite be able to make it to Village Hall by 6. If we're fine confirming that first thing tomorrow morning, that'd be ideal.
Okay. So if you can't make it, then we'll just push it to 7?
Definitely by 7. I'm pretty sure 6 will work. I just need to confirm that before I can commit to it, unfortunately.
We could even make it 6:30. I mean, there's no reason it has to be on the hour.
Sure. Okay, but we are going to meet Monday, March 5th. Oh, the Ides of March. We're going to meet on the Ides of March at 6, 6:30, or 7, and the item on the agenda will be the list, discussion of the structures to get to the right number. That's first on the agenda. The second will be the ordinance itself, final approval of the ordinance itself, and the third will be approval of the transmittal memo. Okay?
Okay.
Any other commissioners have, that's end of agenda item number 5, agenda item number 6. Any commissioners have reported, or are we reported out? Glenn, anything on staff report?
I don't think
Hearing
anything
none?
comes to mind, Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
Okay. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Paul and Margaret, thank you all for all your hard work for the last month and a half. And one more meeting. I'm sorry I had to do one more, but one more meeting, and then we'll see where the village board takes us. So a roll call vote on adjournment, please.
Certainly. Member Bergman.
Yes.
Member George.
Yes.
Member Minor.
Yes.
Member Nickel.
Yes.
Vice Chair Richardson.
Yes.
And Chair Kraus.
Yes. We are adjourned at 8:27 or 8:28. Thank you all. I know it's been a long weekend
Thank
to go
you,
through.
Steve.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. We're really making progress.
We are.
Yeah, finally.
It was great.
Have a great weekend. We'll have fun going through the list again, and we'll see you Monday.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take
Good night,
care.
everyone. Good night.
Night.